Hey Natalie, so there's a lot of connectors and stuff, but like I heard there's tons of them, but what's the connection with Power Apps, Power Platform? Like what's the link?
Yeah. So, without connectors, right? The Power Platform is pretty much nothing. We need connectors to read and write data to some of the most popular services that we use, whether you're using the Outlook connector or you're using some third-party connector like a Salesforce connector or Adobe, right? You can't build a flow without connectors, and you can't build you can build a Power App, right? But then it's not reading and writing any data from whatever backend service you need, right? So our team and the Power Platform in general has well over 550 connectors as of today, which is pretty awesome. And some of those connectors are built by Microsoft. Some of those connectors are built by API owners or the people and the companies who own the backend services, such as Adobe. And some are actually built by independent publishers. So the Independent Publisher Connector Program started back in July, and I wanted to share you all some updates, but also give you an overview about the program and how to get involved. So let's get right into it. So again, independent publisher connectors are connectors submitted by anyone. You don't have to be Adobe to build and submit the Adobe connector to our platform. You can be anyone. We've seen students do it. We've seen MVPs do it. So anybody is capable of doing this. And of course, if you've built a custom connector before, you'll know that there's no code required to build a connector. It's optional through our custom code feature. But essentially, as I mentioned, these are connectors built by anyone. They show up as premium connectors in Power Apps, Power Automate, and even beyond the Power Platform in Azure Logic Apps. And so we have tons of connectors already in this program that have been submitted, tons in the pipeline as well. So we'll go over that now. And so why would you even contribute? Why have the previous independent publishers contribute to this program? There's a couple of reasons for that. One of the main ones is gaining visibility through Power in the Power Platform in general, right? So when I show you a little walkthrough of the product, you'll see that the person who built the connector is featured directly within the product, is featured in the documentation. So it's a really great way to build your brand, and it's proof that, hey, you know what you're doing. You know how to build a connector. You're a pretty good expert in this field, right? Because you've shown that you've built it and that it's gone through our rigorous certification process. You also have maintainer rights on your connector, and you can work with other people. And so we've seen a couple of connectors that were submitted that were built by 2 or more people, and they put that all onto GitHub together, which is awesome. Receive the official stamp that your connector has been validated and certified. Again, it goes through a certification process, both manual and automated, all within GitHub. And it's just another reason to show that, hey, this person is an expert in this field. And of course, it counts as an open source contribution for MVPs and for anyone else who's interested in joining an open source community and contributing. The reason why this started in the first place was because people wanted to submit their connectors to our platform, and there was no other way to do that. And of course, the last main benefit is relatively new, Credly certificates and badges. So I have an example on the right that we recently put out. So we have 3 different stars signifying different levels of contribution. But as long as you contribute to our repository, you at least get the first star. And if you build a connector out fully, you get a 2-star badge. And if you build out more, you get a 3-star badge, right? So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of get involved and get excited about this, because you can show this off on LinkedIn. All right. And if we move on, so we have 38 connectors in production today. You see that some of them we've got a lot of weather-related connectors. There's AccuWeather, there's weather forecast, there's the weather channel. So a lot of things that you can use for personal productivity, but also probably for science as well, right? And you can also see that there's a SpaceX connector, there's an EONet by NASA. So there's these trends that we're seeing of what people are interested in building and what APIs people like to follow. There's a New York Times, and I'm obviously biased from that because I am originally from New York. And there's also super powerful connectors that users have been asking for a very long time, such as the Airtable connector, such as the Etsy connector, the Yelp connector, and the HubSpot connectors that we have today. So we're really happy that we have those as an option. And all of these other connectors are also super useful. They've gone through our certification process again, so they're all ready to be used within the product. And so what I'll do now is I will show you how customers can use independent publisher connectors in Power Automate. And the incredible thing is you don't need to download anything. We deploy them all, so they're available directly in the product. So let's go on and take a look at what they look like. All right.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. So here we have Power Automate, right? So I just quickly put down a trigger, just because a lot of the connectors that we have through the program mainly have actions, right? So in order to build a flow, you always need to start with a trigger and then have an action following it. And so I've chosen the Etsy connector, which was built by Troy Taylor, and you'll see his name very shortly. And you can see that Troy has spent a lot of time on this connector and making sure that it's super useful with all these awesome endpoints that he has, whether it's get a receipt, right? Get a transaction, get a shops transaction, whether you have an Etsy account yourself, or you're trying to learn and gather data about another Etsy organization or shop, right? So, and also allows you to kind of prepare listings beforehand and automate all of this, right? So this is just one of the connectors, but it doesn't matter. Like if I click on any of them, right? If I click on any of these actions, let's just see what it shows up. So you always see the connection name and the API key, of course, depending on the authentication, but this is what the user is required to provide. And then you can see that it's published by Troy. You get this little heads up that, hey, this is an independent publisher connector. Here's what they do. You see the overview of the connector and also when it was last updated. So this is super helpful. And you can also learn more about this connector on the connectors page within here or within the documentation. So each connector, of course, comes with documentation as all others do, right? And you can see that this is available across Logic Apps, Power Automate, Power Apps. And you can see, again, who built it, what's the backend service, what's the privacy policy, and you can take a look at all the actions a little bit in more detail than they are in the product, right? So this is a really good reference to kind of learn more about it. But in general, I mentioned that all these connectors are in GitHub. So this is where most of our connectors lie, even beyond independent publisher connectors. But let's zoom on into the independent publisher connectors folder. So again, whatever's in the product is also in here. So if you're curious to see, if we go to Etsy or any of the others, if you're curious to see, the README file, which actually gets turned into the documentation, which we'll talk about later. You can also see the Swagger file, the API properties file, and everything else. So there's full transparency here about what the connector is doing, right? Of course, again, our team does an intense certification process. We're always making sure that the connector is actually connecting to a service that the publisher says it is. So we do all those checks, but customers can also take a look if they want. So let's go back to the presentation now that I kind of gave you a bit of an overview of the product, the documentation, and GitHub. So let's get right back into it. So I wanted to walk through how to submit a custom connector to the Independent Publisher Connector program, especially if some of you have built custom connectors in the past or you're new to this area. So step one, building one, right? Some of the independent publishers have built a custom connector years ago, and then they decided to open source it on GitHub, right? But we also see that some people, it's their first time building a connector in general. So to get started, if you really want to build a connector that's going to have a lot of impact, you can go into our wiki and go to Top Connector Asks. That's what here at the top right. Also, if you're new, beyond our documentation, you can also take the learning module to learn how to build a custom connector. Highly recommend that one. And then you will prepare your artifacts. So you have 3 artifacts. We saw a little sneak peek of that in the GitHub. The API definition, which is a Swagger file, API properties, which talks about authentication, and the README file, which is directly put into the documentation. And then you'll be using the CLI, the PACon CLI tool to download the artifacts and add any necessary metadata. All of this is in our documentation to help you get started step by step so it's clear. And just to call out, make sure you've added summaries and descriptions for your parameters and schemas, since that's the one thing that kind of slows down the certification process. If we get that early on, it gets nice and smooth. And then you submit to GitHub, right? So you create your pull request, you title it, if it's Etsy, independent publisher, paste screenshots to show that it works, because we want to make sure that we get the heads up even before we start doing our verification, so there's not too much back and forth. And you don't need to submit an icon. If you remember on the previous screen in Power Automate, the connector had this icon right here. So essentially, we use that generic icon for all independent publisher connectors. And so there's no need to create a connector. And the reason why for that is it's legal reasons. It's not built by the backend service owner. But of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't build a custom connector to a company that you don't own or the backend service that you don't own, right? We definitely don't want to hold that forever. And then upon submission, you'll see a couple of validations run, including the Swagger validator that automatically provides results. But then also we have somebody on our team named Srikanth, who's incredible, and he looks at them manually. Step 4, you'll get a lot of comments from Srikanth. There'll be some back and forth, and the process takes about 2 weeks or a little bit longer than that, depending on how many issues there are with the connector. And then, of course, you can submit an update to the connector anytime after it's deployed. And we're also seeing that other people are coming in and contributing to the same connector that somebody else has built, which is pretty awesome to see. We love collaboration. And then the last step, show off your connector. Put it on Twitter, put it on LinkedIn, talk about it. We've also seen a couple of customers reaching out and saying, hey, I love your connector, to the actual independent publisher. So it's pretty incredible to see it all for full circle. And, we have a coffee chat. We also have opportunities to demo. We do a bi-weekly PNP call on Thursdays. We also do YouTube recordings. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved both within this program and beyond in the PNP community. So yeah, that's all I had today. And I hope that was a good overview of how you can get involved, what the connectors look like, and why it's important to contribute.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. I'm sure people have questions. So now let's go see in the chat, what are those questions?